It ignored it. The teacher this time gave a verbal reprimand. So that's kind of how you read these forms. What I'd like you to do is to get together, read the general description of Amy in terms of what's going on, and then start just from that sheet right there. What have you learned about Amy? Any ideas about what kinds of things might set the behavior off? Anything about what you think the function may be? Anything about current consequences that either may be good or bad that you might want to think about? Gee, that seemed to work, or that might be something to think about in the future. Take that first piece of data. Then turn to the second one as a group. Go through it, do the same thing. Read it, say, what am I seeing there? What helps me understand the function? What helps me understand the social context? I want you to work as a group, see if we can come up with what you think. A, identify a target behavior, because she's got a couple. 2, what do you see the function of it is? All right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so get in your groups. I'll walk around, kind of play with you as we're going through this. We've done this before, so this isn't brand new.
Non-compliant.
Non-compliant. Verbal and physical aggression.
Failure to engage in tasks.
Failure to engage in the task.
Leaving the area.
Leaving the instructional area.
Urinating.
Urinating on her textbooks and other materials. Okay. All right. So she's got kind of a number of behaviors you can select, doesn't she? Is that pretty typical of the kids you work with? Mm-hmm. How many of you have a kid that only has one target behavior? All right. So part of what you've got to decide is, are you going to work on all of those? No. Okay. Sometimes you can begin to say, are there behaviors that sort of serve as initial behaviors in the chain? Okay. So we've talked about non-compliance. We've talked about failure to engage in the activity. We've talked about verbal and physical aggression. We've talked about urination. Right? Are any of those behaviors kind of the front end?
Non-compliance.
Non-compliance would be a pretty early one, right? All right. That's probably a larger behavior, okay, in terms of it covers a lot of area. What else might be one of the entry behaviors? Failure to engage. Now that might be a more conscripted behavior to be able to deal with. It involves compliance, but it's a little bit narrower than compliance in itself. All right. So part of the issue is then, and we'll let you work a little bit about this. How would you operationally define failure to engage? What kind of factors might you want to look at in terms of how you're going to define that? You want to make it observable and measurable. So what kind of things come into play there?
When she starts to outright ignore you.
Okay.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry. I said when she just really just fails to do anything that you say, fail to respond to any request.
Okay. So she fails to respond to any request. How does that differ from compliance then? Isn't compliance, non-compliance, kind of a student fails to initiate an activity upon given a request? Right? Which might be a good operational definition for that, right? John, or Amy in this case, fails to initiate the teacher's request within 30 seconds of it being given, if you were looking at compliance. For task engagement, it might be a little bit different in terms of a little bit narrower again. How does somebody show you they engage?
They do something.
All right. So Amy fails to engage in the requested activity, e.g. reading, writing, her eyes are not on the instructional materials. Some of those kinds of things. How will I know? Now, you're always going to have a problem with this, because can some of you attend and not look?
Yes.
Yeah. But do I know you're attending? No. So one of the big problems that you have in any operational definition is that you're not going to be exact. All right. Somebody might say, but she could be attending. Yes, she could be. But if she's not looking, I'm not going to count it as attending. Can you also look at me and not pay attention at all?
She
Yeah.
has a hearing loss, correct?
She has a hearing loss.
So you have to almost assume if she's not looking, she's not attending.
Okay.
Well, and also the teacher's not really wearing the FM system 100% of the time.
Right. So there's a teacher behavior. We're going to get to that. There's some teacher behaviors involved in this kind of thing too, right? Okay. So in this case, observing is going to be pretty critical for this child. So I do want her eyes directed towards the speaker, or whatever the situation might be. All right. So I'm going to define it that Amy fails to display active engagement such as reading, orally reading, writing, speaking, or her eyes are directed towards the instructor or instructional material. All right? So that becomes my operational definition. All right? Now, what factors, as you've read this, seem to play a role in it? One is she has a hearing impairment. Okay? Is that going to be a problem? How might that be a problem? She doesn't hear. Yeah, just as in this situation, if all of a sudden somebody up here over here speaks, and you get a person like me who's not necessarily aware of this and I don't repeat it, she might miss an awful lot of class discussion, making it very difficult for her to stay engaged in the task. All right? The teacher is failing to wear her FM device in terms of being able so that Amy can actually pick up the content. All right?
And the class needs to be educated in terms of how you accommodate a person with a hearing impairment in your group. Everybody can't talk at once. You need to educate who's speaking, those kinds of things, and the rules need to be followed.
Okay, so we have to make some clarifications, which again, your typical general education teacher may have no understanding of that whatsoever, right? Or very rudimentary understanding in terms of what's going on. So certainly not clear enough to maybe teach kids and to actively give feedback as they engage in those situations. All right? What else did you pick up from this? Okay, yeah, so the ADHD is going to be an issue in terms of, again, part of the thing is that there's some memory aspect. If I'm giving tasks that have lots of steps to it, the kid kind of goes, I got the first step, okay, yeah. You give the second one, the first one's gone, they're on the second one, all right? Now I give the third step, the second one, the first one's gone, the second one's now gone, the third, I get done, the kid goes, what do you want, what am I supposed to do? I just told you what to do. Yeah, I know, but I don't have it anymore, okay, it's gone. All right? And again, this is not them trying to make your Thursdays difficult, so we've got some comorbid issues going on here. All right? What else might be an issue?
Anxious comes in front of the academic or social demands, there's an anxiety element.
Okay. All right. And I don't know about you guys, I am seeing a huge increase in anxiety disorders in schools. Huge, in staff and kids. And I think a lot of it has to do with this high-stakes testing stuff that we're doing, an awful lot. I think we're putting so much pressure on teachers who then turn right around and put it all on the kids. But I'm seeing a lot more anxiety disorders. And so helping kids realize, how, first of all, maybe dialing back a bit, but secondly, how do you handle anxiety? Giving them some strategies. And sometimes we'll tell you, well, don't worry about it. Well, yeah, but I'm going to worry about it, okay? And sometimes the best way to deal with some of that is to say, what's the worst that could happen? You know what? You can survive that. Let's go. Okay? Because sometimes I've got a right to be anxious. I could fail this test. Yes, you could. But you know what? Life will go on.
Anxiety, when I see this aggression, I ask them to describe what it looks like. And I'm seeing so many kids going to fight or flight. It's unbelievable because teachers don't know how to handle that anxiety at this level. So they push the kid until the kid gets to this level, and they have nothing to do then but go and fight or flight.
Right.
Because they think they're in trouble, and I've got nothing to lose, and my anxiety is so high, I've got to get out of here, but I can't escape the school system. I don't know where I go, so I'm a fight them.
Right. And we've talked before. I think a lot of times, like anxiety, you were saying the kids can't know how to get away from it, and they don't have the answer. I think sometimes we fail. That's part of that. Do we have clear rules? I get crazy. I go into a lot of schools, and I've said this before, but one of the number 1, 2, or 3 reasons kids get sent to the office in most schools is disrespect. Yet we do not teach kids what they should do in the situations that are most frequently lead to disrespect. So if a teacher becomes disrespectful to me, what am I supposed to do? If you correct me in front of all of my peers and make me feel stupid, what should I do? So you take these issues that are common for triggering this behavior, and we don't give them an answer. And then we just tell them when they do the wrong thing, that's the wrong thing. Again, that would be like me teaching you how 4 + 4 is 8 by just saying, you just keep guessing, I'll tell you when you get it right. Right? I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is. I'm just going to let you guess. And that's what we do with a lot of things like that. So I'm anxious. I'm feeling... My son had a bad habit of smiling when he would get nervous. Now, for some teachers, that's like a red flag, right? So, why are you smiling when I'm correcting you? It's because I'm scared to death, and you're spooking me, and I smile when I get spooked, okay? You'd get in big trouble for that, okay? But helping kids figure out what's going on, all right? So anxiety. What else are we seeing with Amy here? What other issues might you be, as you read through this?
Well, throughout the whole thing, it seems like she's mimicking a lot of behavior from home. That there's a lot of defensiveness going on. She spends a lot of time with the grandmother, adversarial, so she's doing it probably, her behaviors in a more juvenile form than what's going on at home.
Is it real unusual to have kids with hearing impairments that have a little bit more immaturity? Okay, so that, part of the whole social development issue is a tough issue in terms of a lot of things. The whole peer thing, if the peers are nearby and they're laughing, I think they're laughing at me. I don't understand what's going on. I wasn't part of what's happening, so I interpret it from my own head. So that whole hostile intent kind of issue kind of thing plays into play. Part of that home thing, homes are interesting places. How many times do you hear parents go, my kid doesn't do that at home? And what do we do as teachers? We kind of go, yeah, right. Okay? The reality is that sometimes they're absolutely correct. Now, part of the issue is because they know the kids so well, they do this very formal dance, and the issues that trigger this kid are never going to come up. And they don't even know they're doing it. They have been doing it for so long, they don't realize how much their family system is actually impacted to keep these things from happening. But they don't understand why you're having this problem, because they don't have it at home. Okay? The other issue is that I think we've done a disservice by virtue of, I think schools tend to be very punitive. And if you want to punish my child, what is my natural reaction? To run to their defense. Okay? One of the things, again, I think, and we've talked about this in other sessions that I've done with you guys here, but if you are doing interventions, and we'll talk more as we develop the BIPs later on, does the behavior intervention have an instructional component? Does this teach the kid anything about what the behavior problem is? And if it doesn't, don't do it. Right? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I'll go into schools and it's like, all right, so the kid got in a fight. What did you do? Well, I sent him home. He's on suspension for a day. What is he going to learn about anger and anger management by being home for a day? He went to in-school suspension. What is he going to learn about anger and anger management in in-school suspension? And if the answer is, well, he'll think twice before he does it the next time, is the best you can come up with, dig deeper. Okay? It's like if a kid had a reading error and I said, that's not how we read. You are done reading. That's not how you decode in this class, young lady. You better think about it tomorrow. You'll get this back when you can read. Right? What do we do when a kid has a reading error? We teach them. We find out where the error is, we find out where the breakdown is, and we teach them. If I've got a behavior problem, where's the breakdown? Teach it. If your intervention's not doing that, you're not doing what you need to be doing.
What's interesting on our behavior forms, it says on the BIP, is this a skill deficit or performance deficit? And almost every time it's performance deficit, and I go, but you've got 2 pages of social work goals and you said it's a deficit. So how can you possibly say that it's a performance? And if it's a skill deficit, then you better get something under instructional, even if it's just social skill training. Because that's what it means. But it's just amazing to me to look at how many 2 pages of social work goals and call it performance deficit.
Yeah. We are, that's that whole, schools are punitive. Schools are coercive, punitive places. The research, it needs to be redone. There was research done by the Colvin and some of the people out in Oregon that over 90% of the responses that schools give to kids for behavior problems involve punishment and nothing else. All right, so we can do better than that. It's really a big part of why the big push for positive behavioral intervention supports. Anything else you're picking up from Amy here?
Math is an issue.
Math is an issue.
She's beginning to threaten her behaviors, like urinating, so
Okay.
she has to know that it's getting with that.
All right. Yeah. That's a pretty powerful behavior, isn't it? Most of us are going to have a real problem with people peeing all over their classroom. Okay. Okay. And she knows it's a good one, so she's upping the ante. You had your hand up. Oh, okay. Anybody else? All right. So that's some of the issues now. So pick one of those behaviors. Go on through the rest of the data. Go data set by data set and see what you can collect from about that behavior and what it means in terms of why she might be doing it, what kind of things set her up, so that you can begin to think about how are you going to foster or build a good behavior intervention plan for Amy. Okay? Go. All right, do we have a group that would like to volunteer in terms of what behavior they selected and what they came up with? Let's show some bravery here. All right, I'll pick on somebody. How about you guys? What'd you come up with? What'd you look at?
We picked the failure to engage in the activity.
All right, failure to engage in the activity.
And we have like two functions with that. That she might not
Real loud.
She might not have been hearing the directions just in general with the hearing loss, and then if the teacher wasn't using the FM. So it was a dual there. And then with the ADHD, you know, maybe she was unable to start this activity. If she's drawing, it's something that she enjoys doing, not having that ability to teach. We talk about executive functioning. Not being able to, she knows that there's something that she should be doing, but not being able to. And also the anxiety associated with that new activity. She's already anticipating, well, this is something new, and I don't know how to do it. And
So there could be two factors playing into it. One is the fact that she may not be hearing the directions in terms of what's going on. The teacher's not using the FM. She's got the hearing impairment. Second, she's got the ADHD issue playing in there, and the anxiety. So I may not have the executive function to know how I should start to engage in this task, be able to follow directions, and then I become anxious in terms of what's going on. So those are factors that play into it. What's the function? You said two functions. Actually, that's all one function. What is the function there?
We're still up in the air kind of discussing escape and attention. Because
Okay.
after we reviewed, we saw that her teachers weren't giving her attention. I mean, even negative. She wasn't, it's just go, leave. They don't want to deal with it. So we thought, well, maybe if she had more positive attention, and then we could reanalyze to see that is it truly escape.
Okay, so two issues came up. One is escape and avoidance. The other could be attention. But then they were saying as they would look at the teacher response, in many cases the teacher didn't respond. There was no attention given. What did that do to Amy's behavior?
It escalated.
Did it escalate the behavior as you saw what's going on?
No.
Yeah, it's actually kind of, it's a little bit questionable. In some cases, she was fine. You let me sit and write and let me sit and draw, I'm happy as a clam. Now, if attention were truly what I was after, is that likely? So that might begin to argue a little against attention. Now, you may have to perturb the thing a little bit to see what's going on. One of the problems you've got with attention is that most of the time, kids need attention before they can get anything else. So there will always be an attentional feature to most behaviors, because even to get you to throw my butt out of here, you got to attend to me first, right? So if I want to escape, short of that I get up and run out of the room myself, I need your attention to throw me out. So attention will always play somewhat of a role, but then again, looking and saying, where does that attention lead me? What's going on? So you were wise to say, let's look at the teacher behavior and see what happens. That may rule out against it. Now, the other hand is the fact that attention does play somewhat of a role. You want to keep that at least in the equation somewhat, because, how am I attending to this? And she's using some pretty provocative behaviors in some cases, right? Temper tantrums and urinating tend to get your attention. Okay. All right. Anything else you saw? Any other, like in terms of antecedents or consequences that you think might be playing a role in this?
We talked about she was able to go home sometimes.
What's that?
That she was able to go home.
Okay. So in some cases she can go home. So if I wet myself and I won't change and grandma or mom comes over, in some cases I can go home. At least I get some attention from grandma and mom. I might want that. All right. Anything else? Yeah, is this pretty effective behavior for her? Yeah, in a lot of cases, she's getting to escape, isn't she? And what's the consequence the teacher's giving her? Let her escape. Do we ever do that? Huge. Right? Huge. All right, so now this goes back to your comment in terms of the teacher behavior. Would you ever be able to change Amy's behavior if you don't change teacher you're here? Not in 100 years. All right? If you don't change what Mrs. Zimmerman is doing with this kid, you are not going to change Amy's behavior, because Amy's behavior works. Okay? And the only way that I'm going to start changing is when it doesn't work quite so effectively and something else that's more pro-social works more effectively. All right? Anybody pick a different behavior? Any other insights that you came up with in this situation as you were looking at your data? Jump in here. You guys picked a different behavior. What were you looking at?
Well, originally we did leaving the area, but there was really no ABC data on what happened right before she left the area. There really wasn't a lot of data. So if you look at it, we try to almost connect it to non-compliance as almost a refusal to do the directive or to do the task. And we came up with some of the things too. When we looked at...
Let me stop there for a minute. So they were looking initially at leaving the instructional area as their target behavior. But what they found was that there was really no data to really target that specifically. All right, so then they said, well, maybe it really shoots back down to a non-compliance, a failure to comply with teacher requests.
So if you look at the teacher interview, she talks about transitions to new activity. We know there's a lot of anxiety. She talks about how the teacher thinks it's non-compliance for some of the behaviors that you're seeing. And then we go to the ABC data, and even when she provides the verbal reinforcement, giving the attention, she still doesn't comply to that. What was interesting to me is when I'm looking at your direct observation of teacher and peer response, it doesn't matter if she gives, some of these, if she gives ignoring, or if she actually, if she ignores when she does do it, or if she ignores when she doesn't do it, it's still the same response. Okay. It's really interesting. I mean, if she ignores the behavior, she gets the same response. If she ignores, doesn't do the, ignores the request, the teacher ignores. When the kid does comply with the request, the teacher ignores. It's really interesting.
So a couple of issues came up. They were looking at antecedents from the standpoint that it seemed like transitions were a big problem. Okay, and now you brought up anxiety. What else is going to go along with a transition for a child like Amy? Okay, anxiety. Why am I going to be anxious? Confusion. All right, yeah, all of a sudden I've got to understand what the next request is. So, A, am I hearing this? B, can I follow all the directives because of these? So the hearing impairment, the ADHD, the fact that the teacher is not using the accommodations, all those things play into the fact that I've probably got a very high probability of not engaging in this next task very effectively. All right, which probably leads to what? Anxiety. Because I'm probably going to look stupid. I'm going to be, if any of you, did any of you take a foreign language and you didn't quite have it? Right? And the teacher's only going to speak German. I took German, right? Only speaks German. And you're kind of going, I understood 3 of those words, but I'm really not sure what the hell she just asked me to do. Okay? So I'm going to sit back and hope somebody else picked it up and they can do it, right? So think about how that would be all day long if I wasn't picking up necessarily what was going on. So I get anxious. All right? Then looking at some of the consequence issues. If I complied, all right, so obviously compliance is an issue if you move to compliance. If I complied, what was the most common consequence? Nothing.
Or reprimand.
Okay, all right. If I didn't comply, if I just ignored it, what was the most common consequence? Ignoring. Okay, so A, does ignoring pretty work? Does it work? It's pretty effective strategy? I use this example a lot, and guys, I apologize again. Men learn this early. Okay? As wives, girlfriends, whatever, if you tell us to take out the garbage, we don't say, I'm not taking the garbage out. We just ignore you. Right? We usually go, okay, and then we walk off. And if we walk off, what happens after a while? You take out the garbage, right? Right? Ignoring is incredibly effective. Okay? Now, the other problem is that do teachers tend to reinforce compliance? In your experience? No, we expect kids to comply. So if you have a child in which compliance is an issue, again, part of the issue is helping the teacher understand this is an issue. Therefore, while you would not normally pay attention to this, for this kid, we're going to have to pay attention. Now, did Amy comply to some behaviors? That is also something, if you are taking data on compliance, you want to pay attention to. What things is she likely to comply with? Why? Why would I want to know that?
Because it's telling you what works.
I want to ask her to do more of that. Why would I want her to do more of that? Because I can reinforce her when she does. Okay? So all of those things become very important when you're collecting data to know, and oftentimes I won't only just mark that she complied, I'll put a line and say, this was to this behavior, this was to this behavior. My experience is that for a lot of kids, large motor behaviors are complied with more than than fine motor. Will you go get me a dictionary from the back of the room? Let's put on your coat. Let's see. Those things tend to get better compliance. The other thing is an intervention for compliance. I oftentimes want to prime the pump. So if I want Jill to do something she's not likely to do, I'm going to start by asking her to do something she is likely to do. Then I can reinforce her, then I ask her to do the thing that she's not likely to do, because I've already kind of set the stage that I'm paying attention to when you comply. All right? So knowing those things help you build a better plan when you get to that plan building stage.
I have so many plans when I go into teams that they say it's non-compliant with non-preferred activities. But what does that mean? I don't know what a non-preferred activity is, so how do I know how to write a behavior plan?
Right. Yeah, so if I don't, she was saying that a lot of times it says, non-compliance and non-preferred activities. Okay, well, what's that non-preferred activity? The other issue is should that shock any of us? How many of you like to comply to non-preferred activities? Okay? In fact, what we're going to do this afternoon is push-ups for 20 minutes. We're going to do solid push-ups. All right, right after lunch. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay. Most of you would have a break. You'd have some reason not to be able to be back here. If you don't like doing it, you find a reason not to. All right. One of the things that I'm involved a lot in Wisconsin. Wisconsin seems to be a lightning rod right now for restraint and seclusion and restraint cases. And preschools are the #1 target. Because what do preschool teachers do when kids don't behave? They pick them up and move them. The minute I pick a kid up, what am I doing? I'm restraining him. Now, there's a part of me that goes, this is just absurd. First of all, preschool kids don't have the language to use a lot of the verbal de-escalation. Let's talk about why you're angry, right? They get, okay. But they're nonetheless they're being targeted big time. Okay. Now, part of the issue is that where the things break down is that you go into the preschools and we've got teachers asking kids to do things that developmentally make no sense. So I've got 3-year-olds that I'm trying to have sit for 25 minutes. And of course the kid can't, so he gets up and runs. And when he gets up and runs, and we had one school that was tying these kids into Riften chairs up there. Because if I don't tie them up, they're going to run. Well, if you try to set them down for 25 minutes, any 3-year-old's going to run, right? So it's much more antecedent kind of issues, not consequent. You're not going to do a lot of consequent things when the kid's doing it that's going to be effective. The kid's gone. It's the front end. But if these teachers don't get on that, what they're getting is they're getting cited for too much restraint. All right? So it becomes this issue of paying attention to those factors. So in this case, non-preferred activity, does that make any sense? Does this activity make any sense for this kid? Sometimes what we'll find is we're asking kids to do things that really don't make any sense for the kids. And you'll get teachers going, well, but they have to learn how to deal with that. Come on. Yeah, the other part of it is that they have to learn. And that's usually a process, not an event. What are you doing to forward the process? Okay. All right, other insights people came, other groups. Anything else?
Just one quick thing.
Yep.
We were thinking for additional data, we would like to be able to see the comparison of the FM usage and the compliance. Was there actually a correlation between when the teacher was using the FM system, would the compliance increase or not?
Right. Yeah, that would probably be a very important thing in this case, right? To see, does that accommodation make a difference? And how might that data be helpful? Go ahead.
I think that along with that, though, you have to make sure the FM is working. Because many times I find kids in the regular ed program that have an FM And the regular ed teacher didn't know that it wasn't working. She had it on, so she was using it. And the child had on the hearing aids. And nobody didn't know until I got the child and said, what's going on? What's happening? I can't hear you, Miss Tracy. And so then we get batteries and all that. And then the child starts to act different too.
Okay. So one of the issues is data on if the child has the FM, if the teacher is using the FM system, the child is using it, and is it working? So it's working and is being used. Does that show a difference? And that would probably be very important data. One of the things, like if you look at that direct observation data, you'll notice that it's usually like a request, child compliant, and then what does the teacher do? I always put what does the teacher do. Sometimes I'll even put a line for what do the peers do if I think peers play a big role in this. That's what I sit down and set down to talk with a teacher. They see every mark that I made there. And all of a sudden, so if I was looking at compliance and I sat that down in front of you and I said, you said that one of the problems we're working on with Amy is that she doesn't comply. Here's what I saw when you were asking her to do something. What do you think the teacher would see right off the bat? That she doesn't reinforce compliance, okay? We are very critical about ourselves. Now my job changes. As the person sitting down with her, I begin to be somebody who can support her or him, but set up an expectation. You know, most teachers don't reinforce compliance. We expect compliance. But you're right. With Amy, this is a big issue. We're going to have to pay attention to this. So I can give her or him a little bit of a way to listen to what the feedback is, as opposed to just going in and trying to say, well, you never reinforce her. Let them see it in terms of what's going on. So I oftentimes use that kind of data to set down. So I could look at this FM thing and say, here's with the FM, here's without the FM. If it made a difference, what would that be telling the teacher pretty effectively? Better be using the FM, okay? It's a pain in the butt, you got to put it on, all this kind of stuff, you got to remember it, but wow, this really makes a difference.
Is it reasonable to assume if there's no like verbal praise that none happened?
Yep.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, is it reasonable to assume that if there's no verbal praise marked down that it didn't happen?
Well, it's not even a code.
Where, oh, yeah, it's because it wasn't one to be coded. So if the teacher had given verbal praise, that would have been 3. 3 would have been verbal praise. So the numbering system just goes by, you know, teacher did whatever the teacher does the first time, that's 1. She changes it to some other intervention, that's a 2. Changes it to a third intervention, that's a 3. So you can go up to 6, you can go up to 12, right? Not usually, but you could.
I just worked with a team who thought ABC data was as long as whenever an incident happened, and they go back and they write in why it happened first, behavior. But they can't do exactly what you said. What do the teachers? It has to be an observer other than people who are embroiled in the situation. They get that. They said, well, they've never been to a conference where that was said that it had to be an outside observer, meaning outside of the situation. But they can't get that information that you were just talking about because so much of it will be attention, because immediately most of them will attend to it, not understanding that it could still be escaped if he gets out of it, but you attended to it first by saying, get out of the classroom. So
the statement was that oftentimes teachers take the data themselves. They don't have somebody else going on, and so they're doing the ABC. As the issue comes down and they write it down, it's hard to watch yourself teach.
yes.
All right, one of those of you that have been in the sessions with me before, the only thing I ever ask teachers to take data for is the issue of scatter plot. If people are familiar with scatter plot, where I want you to keep track of how many times, if I'm doing non-compliance, for example, I might say I want you to keep track of how many times Amy complies versus non-compliance. And what I usually do is literally give them a piece of masking tape, and I might have a line down the middle. And this one is complies, this one is non-complies. So if you give a request, she's going to do one or the other. I just want you to mark on which side of the tape. When it's done, take that piece of tape off, put it on a sheet of paper, send it down to me at the end of the day. I'm going to chart out over a course of a week or whatever, where do I see most compliance, most non-compliance. Sometimes that information itself will be able to give me some information. I see that she complies better in activities that require more hands-on, and she's got some movement tied into it. If she has to sit for long periods of time and attend, we have problems. I see that she complies better with Mr. Smith and Miss Adams than she does with other teachers. This seems to be a teacher-based, plays a factor in this. But if nothing else, it tells me when I should be there to observe. I'm usually not sitting around going, God, I've got just tons of time on my hand. I think I'll just follow her the whole day, okay? Where do I want to see her? Well, I want to see her where she's having problems, but I also might want to see her where she isn't having problems. Okay? So after that, the teacher doesn't collect data. Now, who does the, by the way, whose job is it to do an FBA in a bit? By law, who is given the job of doing an FBA in a bit? The team. Do not be the person who does it all, because then you have to sell it. So what I might do is I want Jill, and part of this sometimes I actually do on purpose, okay? So Kari over here is very good at attending and praising Amy when she complies. Jill isn't. One thing I might do is say, okay, Jill, I'm going to come in and free you up for 20 minutes. I'll come take your class. We'll engage in something. I want you to go into Kari's class and take data on compliance. Now I'm going to accomplish two things here. What am I going to accomplish? I'll get data. What else might I be getting?
I can see what works.
I might be giving Jill a chance to say, wow, when you actually pay attention to this, it makes a difference. All right? So I free up other staff. Now we come together, we put this in, we build together what the plan was. So don't be afraid to bring other people into the situation. Make sense?
I was going to think as well in the narrative that there were whole days when, or the years did.
Great.
I would be curious to see what the MC was to those days.
What was going on there? What made things work? Yeah. And you oftentimes want to see that. And some behaviors are easier to capture. So the days that things work, what's going on those days? And some kids it's very easy to catch that. Sometimes it's not so easy to catch that. This is, by the way, a real kid. This is a work in progress. But I'll tell you right now, what the first thing that well, I'm not going to tell you that. I'll tell you that later. After you guys talk about your own bips and stuff. Anything else you caught from this data?
Well, the other thing that we wanted to get more data on is when she goes to the resource room, is it just the resource teacher there, or are there other students there as well? And what does she do in there? Okay, so what happens when she goes to the resource room? Is she alone with the teacher? Are there other students? So is that a reinforcing place to be? Is it, what's going on there? What's happening there? Okay? Now, one of the things you've got to be careful of when you're doing an FBA in a bit is that you can collect data till the cows come home. All right? You will always have, like, what about this? What about that? Okay? Don't collect more data than you need. Collect the data you need, but don't collect more than you need. And somebody over there was going, well, what about, could it be this? Could it be this? And I said, it could be. And so one of the other, I forget which one of you laughed. Do we ever really know the function of any behavior? You never know for sure. You're taking your best guess. That's why the hearing officers are saying we want a verification. It's always going to be a best guess. But where did that best guess come from? Can you defend that best guess? All right. If I've got 3 independent sources, they're saying it may not be right, but I understand how you got that, and that's reasonable and appropriate. I did a functional analysis. It may not be right, but that's a reasonable way to have checked this out. And they then say, you could be dead wrong, but you did a good job. If you just said, well, we just sat there and all of a sudden it came to us that it was attention. All right? They're not so sold on that.
I worked with a team who said it was attention and clearly was escape. I mean, even their plan had escape strategies, but they called it attention in their hypothesis. And, you have to be careful because when you call it, you want to make everybody happy, but you don't want to make either side look bad. And so we were talking about fear of failure and fight or flight, and we talked about the fact that sometimes it looks like attention and that a document is a hypothesis. And you can't always be right. We have no crystal ball. And if it doesn't work, then you just go back and do it. It's a fluid document. You just keep moving.
Absolutely. And again, so they had attention, but it was really escape or avoidance kind of a thing. And you're going to be wrong. There are times that you did a nice job, but it still isn't the answer. Something's still going on. All right. We'll see some kids who will substitute new behaviors. All right. They really want that, and they want the control of that function. The other side of it is that, and it kind of goes to one of the things you were doing. If I take oftentimes the tail end of a behavior chain as my target behavior. You know, so if I